One question that comes up a lot whenever a new set hits the PBE server is what do you even play? This is a bit of a weird topic because on one hand it's usually a good idea to just go in blind, try out some stuff and have fun in a low pressure environment. On the other hand, if you struggle with the sheer information overload, then your first experience in a new set can often be a negative one, because let's be real, who wants to constantly go bottom 4? I know this pain all too well, so for this video let's go over some comps that you can use at the start of the PBE cycle. The first comp I can definitely recommend is Vertical Storyweavers. If you activate this trait, you summon a Kale, and at the beginning you can choose to give her either a carry or a support item. For this comp I would simply recommend the rule of just always pick the red one. The first item is more or less a Zeke's Herald, and the second item is quite close to a Ginzo's Rageblade. You want to keep collecting Storyweavers to reach the 5 and then eventually the 7-piece trait to upgrade your Kale to 3-star. While only collecting Storyweavers sounds simple enough, there is one hurdle that you do need to overcome. This comp does a lot better with an early Storyweaver emblem or Irelia, because you need either of them to reach the 7-piece trait. Usually the best way to commit to this comp is simply to get your hands on a spatula, because the emblem can be crafted with the help of a chain vest. In set 11, trait augments also make a return, so if you see a Storyweaver crest in stage 2 or 3, then your life will become much easier. So if everything goes well, then you can already activate the trait in stage 3, which makes your Kale more or less unstoppable in the mid game. Reaching the 10-piece chase trait is usually too difficult, so your normal game plan will be simply to utilize the Kale power spike to rush towards level 9 and then cap out your board with 2-star legendaries that fit into your comp. Besides Irelia, you can also pick up Lysandra, who is a very strong Arcanist, or Wukong to activate Sage together with Zyra. But overall I would just recommend to experiment a bit with the units and figure out what you prefer yourself. Once you feel comfortable with this comp, you can also try around with other Kale items. For example, for your third item, you can also aim for the Tome of Mending, which can resurrect some of your units every 8 seconds. This can help to keep your frontline alive and gives Kale more time to scale, which can sometimes make the difference in a late game fight. Since Kale profits from the star level of your Storyweavers, you can also try to reroll some of them. You can run either Sivir, Zyra or Zoe as your main carry together with Kale. I would say that the trait is surprisingly flexible and allows you to experiment a lot with different setups. Speaking of reroll, one comp that will likely establish itself as one of the better tier 3 comps are Duelists. The core of this comp is based around Tristana, Volibear, Diana and Lee Sin. You want to run either 4 or 6 Duelists, but a good rule of thumb is to only play 6 Duelists if you have the emblem. While the damage reduction is quite powerful, if you end up placing too many weak units just to go deeper into the trait, then you might still struggle a lot in the late game. As with most tier 3 reroll comps, you should be level 7 in early stage 4 and slow roll for your core units. Tristana will act as your main AD carry and take items like Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Edge of Night, or you just give her sustain items like Bloodthirster or Gunblade. Volibear is a bit of everything. He can take your leftover tank and AP items, and he should still feel useful in your fights. Diana is more or less your main tank, especially if you manage to 3-star her, and she is probably the best user for the Duelist emblem in this comp. Since this is the PBE, you don't have to limit yourself to 6 Duelists every game, and you can also try to be a little bit more creative in the late game. For example, you can try to run 4 Sage.
Gotcha, didn't I?
With Zyra, Morgana and Wukong, because this will grant your units in the first 2 rows 30% Omnivamp and allows you to completely skip out on the sustain and focus more on damage and utility items. If you want to go wild, you can also try to include 3 Ink Shadows if the first bonus item is extremely useful for your comp. This can work well with the Duelist emblem, because a unit like Udyr can actually make pretty good use out of it in the late game, and he can act as an additional win condition. Aside from units, you can also try to experiment with positioning. Tristana, her targeting makes her jump towards the lowest enemy, which at least currently seems to be based around total HP and not percentage. In short, this means it's possible for her to jump on the enemy backline if they happen to have less total HP than the enemy frontline. This interaction is quite powerful and it could potentially get changed in the future, so I'm not sure how long Tristana will work like this. Hello, leduck from the future here. It took too long to edit this video. Riot has already changed the Tristana targeting and she will now jump on her current attack target. Honestly, a bit of a shame considering the backline jump wasn't even that strong of attack, but I'm not surprised that Riot wants it removed. I would say it's still good to combine Sage with Duelist and overall it shouldn't even change that much. With Sage you still want her in the second row so she gets the Omnivamp and not the AP, and after her first ultimate she should just jump into safety afterwards. While Tristana, Volibear and Aurelia all make for great carries, I would currently be a bit careful about itemizing Lee Sin as he seems to fill more of a off-tank role and doesn't seem very reliable as a carry at the moment. But enough about duelists, let's talk about Cogmaw reroll, because what kind of list would this be if I didn't include at least one tier 1 reroll? The Cogmaw setup is fairly simple. At the start you simply want to build up your economy while also looking for Cogmaw, Cho'Gath, Caitlyn, Malphite and Neeko. Something that's kind of weird about Cogmaw, even though he's an invoker, he doesn't actually care for the 2-piece trade, because with a blue buff he only has 20 mana and he should cast every 2 attacks anyways. Tier 1 reroll also usually works better if you have multiple copies at the start of the game, so you can reliably find your carry without completely having to sacrifice your economy. One approach you can try is to roll down for the early Cogmaw 3-star and utilize a power spike for a strong early mid game and push for levels afterwards to strengthen your front line. The other approach aims to maintain a high economy and you slowly roll your interest throughout stage 3 where you try to reach multiple 3-stars to get you through the game. The overall rule for the slow roll should be to have at least one frontliner and Cogmaw as 3-star, and afterwards you have to make a judgment call based on how far away you are from the remaining 3-stars. Once you are done rolling, you can start to push towards level 8. Your first addition is usually allowing to max out your trade with Ghostly and Arcanist. Later on you can play 5 Mythic with Nautilus and Lilia, or replace Caitlyn and run Ashe and Amumu instead. Azir is also a great late game alternative to Lilia if you happen to find him, but since you're likely going to end the game with level 8, you shouldn't put your hopes up. There are also other invoker versions that focus on Elune or Lilia carry, but they are a bit more complicated to play, so I'll get back to this trait in a future video. The final comp I want to showcase is all about the Arcanist trait. This comp feels very natural to build and can be quite powerful in the late game. Though this might change if Riot ends up over-nerfing Lissandra, but time will tell in the end. There are lots of different ways to start this comp, but around stage 3-2 with level 6, the actual setup should be quite consistent. You should aim for 4 Arcanist with Ahri, Lux, Eloy and Neeko. You can add a Mumu and Shen to the frontline to activate Warden and Ghostly, and it's also a good idea to pick up Thresh if you find him, as he will become part of your frontline later on. For now, I would recommend using Lux as an item dump for Syndra and give her items like Blue Buff, Jeweled Gauntlet and Nashor's Tooth. But you can also try a setup with Ahri or Zoe, depending on what you manage to find. With level 7, you want to look for Syndra and Thresh so you can activate the Fated buff and connect Ahri to Syndra for more damage. Transfer the items from Lux to Syndra and set her up as your main carry. While in theory you can run 6 Arcanist already with level 7, a stronger frontline is usually preferred to allow Syndra to scale. Once you reach level 8, you can play 6 Arcanist while looking for Lissandra and Set. In the late game, you can replace Thresh for Set and then connect him to Syndra, so now she receives Omnivamp from the Fated bonus. From here, you can either look for Eloy and Syndra 3-star or simply push towards level 9 and cap out your board with more legendaries. This is more or less everything I wanted to showcase today. I can't wait to see how the meta will evolve during the PBE and what kind of crazy comps players will end up discovering. I will be streaming the PBE discovery on Twitch, so feel free to come by if you have any questions. I hope you learned something and see you next time. I would say it worked out. No, that was great. GG.